Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone. I think I have everything set up properly this time. It will be amazing if I do. I'm just going to do a short intro and then we will bring Tim on air. And hello Julian, how are you doing? So everyone, as you can tell, I did the little short video before, but I did get Mudacorum t-shirts in. I am like so psyched about it. And I gave the link in the other video, but I'm going to stick it here. Get the merch. That's all I can say. Get the merch, wear it to Reno. It irritates all the right people. Because they've been irritated before the shirt even came out. They were pre-irritated. So please do. And as always, I'm going to keep all of this really, really quick. If you can support the show, there is my Patreon. I would super, super appreciate it. As I said today on Facebook, I did finally get some gainful employment, but my husband and I made the decision that we want to give myself a year at this YouTube thing, right? And working at becoming a content creator. And so I have pre-chafed Yoba, Yoba. Yeah, Yoba. Okay. I've got, look, a bird. Give it a year. So I've got a not very obligation intensive gainful employment that's less than half of what I was making before, but it's much less hours, much less responsibilities. I can continue to broadcast every day, but at least has some guaranteed income type thing. So if you would like to realize the dream, right there, and I super, super appreciate it if you can do that. You know, I am very uncomfortable with the whole self-promotion thing, though I am getting better at it. And just one other advertisement thing before we get started. There is one of my sponsors. He has a YouTube channel called Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy. As you can see, I am subscribed. You should be subscribed too. It's one of my passions now that I do have a little bit of an audience to start to promote other Liberty content creators. So as a bonus to my top tier patrons, which is $25 a month, you get to ask me to deal with a topic of your choice a month, which I'm going to be recording after this. I'm going to be dealing with homesteading for Clayton, but also I'll promote your Liberty product, your show, whatever, your business, whatever it might be. So now I'm going to introduce our guest. So I'm going to let him to do quite a bit of introduction himself, but I first remember seeing Tim, a long time ago. It was back when Nick was a good chair. And he doesn't need to say anything. I can shit talk people. I don't expect my guests to. So this was a while back. I'm not even sure I was on the LNC when I first heard him speak. Because if I have my years correct, he became leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada in 2014. I wasn't even a Libertarian then, at least until the latter half of the year. So I am going to go to my next screen here. Let me there we go. Okay, can we hear you?
Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you hear me? Listen, audience, since this is I've been a real Liberty scene for a while. I've now peaked. I'm on the Karen and Harl's Pink Flame of Liberty show, and feels fantastic. I finally made it. I didn't think the day would come. Hopefully you can hear all that. You picking me up there, Annette? Or?
I am. I'm getting a little bit. Let me see if I can turn on an echo cancellation, because you're like doubling a little bit, but sometimes that happens. I think I got it all. We'll deal with it. It happens sometimes with live streams. You just never know what the Ethernet's going to do. Okay, so give a little background. Did I have it right? 2014?
Yeah, man, better memory than me. I had to think back. Yeah, it was 2014, and that's when I became leader of the party. Before that, I was kind of I was a rabble-rousing internet troll anarchist, explaining why they shouldn't vote and why they should get involved in the political process at all. And it was funny. I never had any political actions, and I didn't want to get involved in politics at all. And in fact, I wrote an article 6 months before I became leader of the party, explaining why it's probably a vote and why you probably shouldn't get involved in the political process. But what happened with me was I worked in this community called Fort McMurray, which is in northern Alberta, and it was a geological hotspot at the time. Still is a little bit. We have the oil sand, what the environmentalists call the tar sands in our region. Keystone XL was this pipeline that was, I guess, spiking in the interest of these environmentalists. And so we had a steady stream of the environmentalists coming up from Hollywood to explain how we're bespoiling Mother Earth and ruining the planet. And I was, as a firefighter, every firefighter has a side hustle, and my side hustle was I did video production. And so I offer services to all these environmental productions that were just free of charge. I just want to show them some things in my community that the media missed, that might miss, like the fact that the highest per capita in terms of charity in Canada, because of all the success, or because of all the flushing that was occurring up there because of the development we were doing in the area. I wanted to show them the environmental consciousness that we were doing. I worked with Neil Young and Daryl Hannah on a project, and while Neil Young was in town, there was this. We had this eco-friendly carnival that was run. It was called Sustainable, and it ran off the used cooking oil from the restaurants. It had a solar power stage, and I suggested that he get on that solar power stage, and he sing a song powered by sunlight in the heart of dirty oil tree. Just as an artist, I thought the juxtaposition between where we're at, where we're going, because of the consciousness and frankly capitalism is occurring in the community, I think was a great message, and I thought it paralleled Neil's, which was the same, because he put all this time and energy and capital into developing this piece of American badassery, this Lincoln Continental that was a hybrid vehicle that he converted. It, you know, it's millions of dollars and a lot of fossil fuels, and it, you know, produced a lot of CO2 to make this vehicle, but you know, it paralleled what we were doing. He was doing technology, and so of course Neil didn't want to have anything with that. All he wanted to do was shoot the ugly, nasty stuff. And then the next week he went to Washington D.C. and said that my community looked like Hiroshima and Nagasaki after them, and we were committing genocide. So I wrote the op-ed piece that got picked up by the Huffington Post, you know, explaining why Neil Young was undercutting his own endeavor by criticizing and blasting Fort McMurray. I mean, he had a 30-year-old son who had cystic fibrosis, which, if anyone knows anything about it, the life expectancy of people with cystic fibrosis isn't very high. It's like early 20s. And he had this round clock with him, suctioning out his son's, and his son was on the road with him in this bus, a whole caravan of CO2 burning, CO2 producing, you know, environmental messaging. And Neil's, you know, I just wrote, look, you know, you can trace the life expectancy of Neil Young's son to the dirty smokestacks of the Industrial Revolution, that all this excess wealth and the division of labor that allow someone to make millions of dollars just making sounds that people found pleasurable. Which is what Neil Young did. That, you know, embodying all this technology for us, and so he's undermining the very thing. So I wrote all these themes in the article that were very libertarian oriented. Some libertarian Canada noticed it, and they started, you know, kind of headhunting me and conversations with me. And man, it was probably 3 months of me saying no, absolutely no way. I'm going to run for politics. I'll refer you to this whole. I wrote a few months ago that explains why voting is immoral. Certainly, you know, running for our office is immoral. And you know, they just kept up the name Paul over and over again, and saying, you know, are you saying Paul it was negative for liberty? Are you saying that he's encouraging the state? And I couldn't deny the logic. They wore me down, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Ron Paul is more for liberty any of us could hope for in the modern era. He's used that political stage to communicate an important message. And to me, it was always about that. It was always that government is downstream from culture, and why I didn't want to get involved in politics, because I felt like it's putting the before the horse. And what we need to do is change culture. But I was neglecting the fact that, well, gee, we could use that political stage to actually change culture, make libertarians pursue more people. And so finally, I just couldn't deny the logic. And 2 days after I made the commitment to run for Parliament in 2015, my member of Parliament resigned, and I was thrown into a by-election. And that was, early 2014. And I had no idea what I was doing. We threw a bunch of memes against the wall. We created one slogan. I think Austin Pete might have originally coined the phrase, "I want married couples to protect their marijuana plants with guns." I posted that on our campaign slogan. It got picked up, and I was on Fox News and getting worldwide attention. And our convention happened 2 months later. I was nominated for and elected as leader. So I've been leader ever since 2014, and I went from in 6 short months saying never vote to asking people support me for I run for prime minister. So kind of a surreal experience.
I'm still troubleshooting an echo. Are you hearing an echo on your end?
I don't hear an echo. No. Does your audience hear an echo?
Yes, I'm getting that comment. And I'm trying to find out, are you guys hearing an echo just with Tim's voice or with both of ours? And I think it's just with his. So it might be something on your end. You do have headphones on, correct?
I do. Yeah. Let me try this. I'm gonna switch to AirPods and just see if that, and get rid of this microphone. Did that cure the echo at all?
Keep talking.
How's this? Am I still echoey?
No.
Does that make a difference? Okay. Well,
at least I think so.
Okay. Well, that fancy podcasting mic then was not worth its weight. So.
That is exactly it. Much better, everyone says. Even though the sound
All right.
quality's not as good, it's much more listenable. But I was able to catch what you said, and I'm sure the audience will. I'll put a little note when I do final processing of the video at the beginning that at such time stamp the sound gets better so that people don't start listening and then give up. So you were like
Right.
an anti-voting anarchist, and they recruited you
Yes.
into the evil web.
Yeah, that's it. Just it. And again, the name kept coming up, Ron Paul, and I couldn't deny that. I loved what he had to say, and he was in, no uncertain terms. He was using the political stage to get his message out there and make more libertarians and attract a lot of libertarians to his message. So, I just couldn't deny the reason and rationality they were bringing at me. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll use that political stage myself. I mean, if I'm taking these ideas and these principles seriously, and I'm serious about wanting to get them out there into the world and make more libertarians, and I was, because I was blogging and I was doing videos and I was doing podcasts, then why wouldn't I take advantage of one of the biggest stages that is being offered and do that? So I realized I was being irrational and I was just saying no, cooties, and it's kind of being superstitious, and that was it. So yeah, it was reason and evidence and logic that changed my mind.
That is awesome. Now, I never went through the non-voting page because I think that's because I became an anarchist while I was already in the party. If not,
Right.
You never know. Now, but I'm fascinated by the whole thing. I never really got a chance to talk to you about it, about being an anarchist in Canada. For some reason, Americans, we're so provincial. Like, we have no idea what it's like anywhere else. And I realize that we're ignorant and provincial. And that just seems really odd to me. Is there a lot of ANCAPs in Canada, or are you a rare unicorn?
Well, I think I'm fairly rare. I mean, I feel like I know all the anarchists in Canada. There's probably, I would have to guess, maybe 100 or so of us. It reminds me a little bit, Walter Block. I've done a few speaking gigs and a few debates with him, and he says, back in the day when he was hanging out with Rothbard, he once asked Rothbard how many libertarians there were in the world, and Rothbard kind of sat there and started counting in his head on his fingers and came to the answer of like 27 or something like that. And I kind of feel like I could do that in Canada, but look where we're at now in terms of the libertarian message worldwide. So yeah, no, it's probably more than 100, but it does feel like there's not a lot of us here in Canada, that's for sure.
And I listened to, is David the person who's thinking of running after your term? Because you're not rerunning?
Right. So yeah. So my term as leader is up in mid-August. We're having our convention, and I'm stepping back. I just said, I could run again. I could continue being leader, but I'm stepping down for reasons we can get into. But yes, David is actually my podcasting partner on the Liberty Experts. He's an objectivist, and so we often get into debates, between Rothbardian anarchism and objectivism. It's kind of fun. He was thinking about running. I don't think he actually is, though. But we have at least 4 candidates that I know about that are stepping up to run, and they're all, from what I can see, pretty good candidates. So I think the Libertarian Party's in pretty good hands. And
I won't put you on the spot, though. If you ever want to volunteer anything, you could say you could say whatever you want, because like I've kind of got a bad reputation now. We've had our challenges here, if you've been paying attention, with our grand poobahs.
Yeah. I follow American libertarian politics fairly closely. I hang out in the Mises Caucus group, and I see, what's going on in a few other groups. And I pay real close attention because, our party was founded, I think, within a year or just shortly a year after the U.S. Libertarian Party was founded. That, we are, David Nolan, I think, could be credited in some sense for founding our party. We were founded with the same ideas and the same principles and under the same set of circumstances as the U.S. LP. You guys are much bigger than us, and it's interesting to see what's working. So I was interested to see, okay, is the Gary Johnson and Bill Weld ticket the way to go? Kind of this more pragmatist, not a radical message at all. Is that the way to go? Because I have some advisors, when you become leader of a party, you have advisors on all sides of you giving you advice. And one faction is telling me I need to be softer with my message and not scare people away. And I have other people saying, oh, you're too soft. You need to be more radical. So I'm always interested to see what's going to work. And, so I follow it very closely. And yeah, I mean, look, it's, I don't know, part of the reason I'm stepping back as leader is just to take stock and think about this. It's tiring. It's really tiring being involved in libertarian politics. And I think a lot of it has to do with our personality. Recently I've been looking at, I recently did Jordan Peterson's personality test, and then I compared it to what Jonathan Haidt found about political personalities. And, that libertarians have a very specific personality, and our personality, we're high or we're low in agreeableness, which means that we don't get along great with others, right? Which is what I love about libertarians and also what I hate about libertarians. It's very difficult for us to get along in groups. And so there's this constant infighting, and it pains me. I really want us to get past this, and it hurts me. Look, I wasn't a big fan of Gary Johnson, especially when he said something like bake the cake. Yeah. But I was able to defend him because I took what he said in good faith, and I said, okay, I believe him when he says he's a libertarian, and what is he really getting at? And he's saying something that a lot of his detractors are saying now about Facebook and these social media things, which is when the government grants you a monopoly, they then have an obligation to be more inclusive or something like that. Now, I don't think that is a good argument. I would prefer to see the other one, but at least I can see the logic behind it. And when I did a little bit more digging into Gary Johnson's position, and I saw an interview with him, he was making this argument that had something to do with, look, if you have one business in town because government is granting you that business a license and is crushing competition and different things like that, they have an obligation. And I thought, okay, that's more reasonable than his detractors are making him out to be. But where are all the libertarians defending him? Like if when Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton said something completely unreasonable, the first instinct of their supporters was to go to their defense, not to throw them immediately under the bus. But our first instinct as libertarians is to throw each other under the bus. And, that really is disappointing for me. Because you sit here and try to build and build and build. And of course you're going to make mistakes, and of course you're going to say things that aren't that rub people the wrong way.
I'm going to tell you one reason why people didn't come to his defense. Listen, and I love Gary Johnson. I'm going to say something now that everyone's going to go. I had the hugest political crush on Gary Johnson, so bad that people were joking that they were going to make me a Gary Johnson sex doll, that I loved him so much. But I was on the advisory committee for his campaign, where we were trying to tell them what to do not to irritate libertarians so much, to get libertarians to defend them. And they basically told us you can shove it up your ass. So I have no sympathy for him not getting defended, because he wouldn't even take any advice on at least meeting libertarians halfway. It was his way or the highway, and I don't know whether that was Weld or him or his campaign manager, but I don't feel bad after that, because we were on that committee, and it was just basically, I got the nomination, I don't really care. And
yeah, and that's really unfortunate. And look, but I see this over and over again with libertarians. It happened with Joe Jorgensen. I just see libertarians attacking each other all the time, right? I see Tom Woods getting attacked. Yeah, I see Tom Woods getting attacked, and it irks me. I see, all these people that are on the same side just going after each other, and that's one of the biggest challenges I think we face as libertarians. I'm not sure how we overcome that. I don't know. Maybe we don't want to overcome it. Maybe it's better that we fight like cats and dogs and are kind of loners and not inclined to group organization and stuff like that. But the thing is, I think we can also learn it, because look, I'm as libertarian as it comes. I have the same personality as other libertarians, where my first inclination is to say screw you and I'll take my ball and go home. I don't need you guys. But my career as a firefighter has, I think, taught me the value of teamwork. And one of the things as a firefighter is that, look, when you're trying to put out a fire, there's some bad incident commanders out there that make bad decisions. But the time to criticize them is after the fire and behind closed doors. You know, because even bad decisions on the fire ground are better than no decisions. And even, you know, people following suboptimal decisions on the fire ground is better than everyone fighting like cats and dogs on the fire ground, because then that's the worst of all possible worlds. And so I take a little bit of that perspective into my organizational view of libertarian organizations and parties. And I wish that we could find a little bit more of what I find in the fire service, which is we come together when the fire's on, when the election's on and we're under the heat and everyone's coming at us. We have all these fires to put out. We come together as a team and we support our incident commander, no matter how flawed. And then afterwards, behind closed doors, we take care of business, say, okay, you're out, buddy. It's time for a new commander because you sucked, you know? But we do it behind closed doors, not in front of the world to see where, you know, they can pile onto us. So.
Well, I agree with you in half part, because of course I'm a libertarian. I can't agree 100%.
Yeah,
I do agree. In the middle of the election is not the time to be throwing your candidate under the bus. The decisions made, what's it good it's going to do. But I don't agree with correction behind closed doors. I think that breeds corruption, and I guess maybe I'm just very sensitive to that, considering what just happened in the LPUSA. Where we really did have a big case of corruption. But I do agree there's a time and a place, and it's not in the middle of the election. That's for certain. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And no, I agree with you, like, you know, behind closed doors, no, it can expose things to sunlight. You know, that's a fair thing. I think I agree with that as well. You know, let people know why you're ousting your leader and why you're choosing a different one and why you're changing your qualifications or whatever. That's fair. But yeah, I think where you were going with this, Karen, was like, have we had any controversies ourselves? Have we had any infighting ourselves? And the answer to that is resounding. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know the Lawrence Southern controversy.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, the Lawrence Southern. You know, I look back on my leadership, and you know, I have a lot of regrets, and I have a lot of things that I wish I had done differently. That was definitely one of the big ones, the Lawrence Southern thing. And for those who don't know, Lawrence Southern is, well, everyone should know who Lawrence Southern is. At the time she was running as a candidate for us, she was kind of an up-and-coming political commentator. She worked for a organization in Canada called Rebel News, which was an upstart kind of independent media organization. And, you know, she was getting a lot of attention, and she was one of these kind of culture warriors, right? And so she would do things like the thing that got her a lot of notoriety and kind of put pressure on us as a party was she went to a slut walk in Canada, and she put up a sign that said, "There's no rape culture in Canada." And I started getting all these emails of complaint, and I kind of shrugged my shoulder and, you know, thought these people that were complaining were just mentally ill, because they were talking about how she basically re-raped them and stuff like that with their sign. And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. And, you know, at the same time, I didn't understand what she was doing. I didn't, you know, to me, like, I'm never surrounded by that kind of woke leftist culture. I guess she was in university. So I'm like, I thought, like, what does this have to do with libertarianism? What does this have to do with taxation of theft? But at the same time, I was like, whatever. Our candidates, you know, there's some of our candidates that are like, making 9/11 a big thing, you know, conspiracy theories and different things. And, you know, it wasn't my cup of tea, but, you know, we're the Libertarian Party. You know, as long as they subscribe to the non-aggression principle, you know, they can kind of go out there and do their thing. But I was getting a lot of pressure from my executive to do something about her. And, you know, my president at the time, which would be equivalent, I guess, to like the chair of your party, you know, I'm as leader of the Libertarian Party, I'm not the chair per se. I'm more of the public face of the party. So I'd be more like the Gary Johnson or Joe Jorgensen or Dave Smith of the party. And you know, we had people behind the scenes doing all the organizational work and you know, kind of enforcing policy and stuff. Well, Lauren, you know, my president at the time was a transgender person or pangender. I'm not sure what he, she, they were. You know, I respected them and what they were doing. But, you know, they kept telling me that she's a bigot and this and that. And then she tweeted something out that I thought was a direct attack at my president. And, you know, the one thing I won't tolerate is an attack on a team member. Like if we're, you know, again, I come from the fire service, and if you are attacking a team member, you're attacking all of us, and you're telling me that you don't want to be part of the team. I misread the situation. That wasn't actually what it was. I should have talked to her beforehand, but it seemed pretty clear to me at the time. So I suspended her. I said, look, she's suspended until I can talk to her. Well, of course, she then went to Breitbart and everything hit the fan, and we were branded as social justice wars and this and that. So we lost, you know, half our support from that. And then I actually had a talk with her and found out the real story, which wasn't the one I was being told. And I brought her back, and then I pissed off the other half of the party that stayed. So it was that was probably the biggest controversy that we had in the party. And you know,
and she has gone very alt-light. So
yeah, and you know what, I really like Lauren. She and I really love the new Lauren. That, you know, she took some time off and came back, and I think she's showing a real maturity now. You know, she talks about how she contributed to a lot of the problem and the divisiveness she was seeing out there with the way she was, you know, just her rhetoric and the way she was constantly going after people and this and that. And, you know, I thought that showed a real level of maturity. So, you know, yeah, I mean, that was early on in my political leadership, and that was the first big mistake I made. You know, there's been plenty of others. There was a local, or not a local, but a national member of parliament, Maxime Bernier, who lost out on leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada by a narrow margin. But he was positioning himself basically as a libertarian candidate for the Conservative Party. It'd be similar to, you know, at the time he looked kind of like a Rand Paul, right? Like a libertarian light kind of candidate. And he put himself, kind of contrasted himself to Kelly Leach, who was the populist, and he called her basically like another Trump. And she had like a strict immigration policy with a values test for immigrants and stuff like that. And he, you know, at the time he was saying that we don't need no populists like that in Canada. And when he narrowly lost, I actually offered Maxime publicly and privately my spot as leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada. I thought it'd be a coup for liberty if we had a libertarian member, but also make him the leader. Because look, in 2015, when I ran for prime minister for the first time, I cashed in my retirement savings. I blew my pension to fund myself for a year. I killed my career, and you know, I didn't have another retirement fund to cash in to fund myself. And so I thought, what would be better than to have this member of parliament who is a high stature guy who just about won leadership of the Conservative Party, then throwing in with the Libertarians and advancing and really elevating the Libertarian brand. And then I could step away from party politics, pass the baton off, say, man, what a good job I did. Like I got the party to the point where I could hand it off to Max, and now I can step back into the shadows and, you know, just kind of focus on the career. So I courted him for a year, and then he quit the Conservative Party after a year and started his own party, which was a populist party that took all of Kelly Leach's policies about immigration and you know, the values testing and focusing on this push against wokeism, which is fair enough. And he started a party called the People's Party of Canada, which is an unfortunate name. And I think he's going to have some branding. Right, because, you know, I saw shortly after he started that.
Starting. Yeah, here. It's the Bernie
I saw
Bros.
that. So now,
yeah.
So now you've got the leftist populists with the Bernie Bros there. So that was, and then, you know, there was some talk. Max found out that, you know, in Canada, he wasn't an official party yet, and so he couldn't. In Canada, we can offer tax receipts or tax credits to people that donate politically. So if you donate, you know, I think up to $400, you get 75% of it back on your taxes. Well, he couldn't do that because he wasn't an official party. So it was really hampering his fundraising. He found out that if he merged with the Libertarian Party, that he could do that. And I was like, well, so I was approached about a merge, and I was like, well, look, if it's got the same principles, if it's down the line libertarian, and you adopt a statement of principles that is libertarian, and you have all these bylaws that are libertarian, and all it is a name change. I can get behind this if it elevates liberty, but I didn't count on the Machiavellian nature of these people that get elected. He basically took half our membership and left us in the lurch, and went off and did his own things. He didn't follow through with his thing. And, I found out later there was some kind of nefarious thing. Like the first question he asked me was, how is the party incorporated? Like who owns the party? And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're a political party. No one owns us. Yeah, no. But I found out in Canada, a lot of these bigger parties, what they do is they have a corporate arm that does the fundraising, and that corporate. And so there's the entity that is registered with Elections Canada as a political party, but then there's also the corporate entity, which is registered as a corporation with the state, which outlines your board of directors and who controls it and all this kind of thing. And they use that as the fundraising arm. And Max's first question was, well, basically, how are you incorporated? Who owns the corporation? That should have been my first clue. And it turns out, the People's Party of Canada is incorporated, and there's basically three people that own it. Max, his right-hand man, and his lawyer. And so, if it ever folds up shop, all these funds that they've fundraised, millions of dollars, he basically owns it. And I'm like, man, I never would have thought about that stuff. But these guys are operating at a much different level than I am. I'm just like, let's talk about ideas, Max. How are we going to get these ideas out there? And he's like, what's your corporate structure? How are the funds coming in? Let's talk. You need to talk to my lawyer, and we'll sort this out. And so anyways, I learned some hard lessons about the nature of politics, let's say, and the nature of leadership. I learned a lot of hard lessons
this year as well.
Yeah.
More personally, but
yes.
Yeah, but
and how are things going? How are things going with you guys? Like, one of the things that really gives me hope and kind of makes me like almost kind of regret my decision to step down is the prospect of a guy like Dave Smith stepping into be the front man for your party and bring a radical message. I've been bringing a radical message up here, but it's been difficult to cut through the noise in Canada because, like I said, we've had Maxime Bernier and his populist party, a guy that Maxime Bernier was just courting, another sitting MP is on the outs of the Conservative Party of Canada, Derek Sloan, and Max was, I got the sense that he was courting Derek. They were appearing at a lot of events together, shaking hands and different things like that. Well, Derek Sloan has just started his own populist party. And, so we have a ton of parties in Canada. It's very easy for us to get ballot access. I think that's one of the
it's
things.
$100 or so? Oh, no, 100 signatures.
Well, 100 signatures. And it used to be 100 signatures and $1,000. That was a refundable deposit. Well, they got rid of the $1,000, so it's just 100 signatures now. So, it's very easy for a party. It's a little bit more difficult to start a political party. I think you need 5,000 or 20,000 signatures, but it's not insurmountable. And so there's just a ton of political parties in Canada, and it's difficult for us to cut through the noise. So my radical message is getting lost in the noise, and I just don't have the energy to go all these anti-lockdown rallies. I've got a day job. I got bills to pay. So that's part of the reason why I'm stepping down. I'm hoping someone else with a little bit more energy and resources and time can really elevate the brand. But, those are the challenges we face here. So I'm really interested to see now that we've seen a Gary Johnson campaign. I'm interested to see what a Dave Smith kind of campaign, like the polar opposite of Gary Johnson, is going to be able to do.
Yeah, but we might end up with a Justin Amash campaign. And I like Justin.
I like Justin too.
I have the biggest crush on him as well, so I'm just transferring my crush from Gary Johnson onto Justin Amash. But his will be much more like Gary Johnson than it would be like Dave Smith.
Yeah, it's more tamed. And why do you think it is that? Here's my observations of the Libertarian Party in the U.S. What I constantly heard at different conventions I spoke at down there was about people talking about how we get to a win, right? And they defined a win as get a person elected. And to me, that always felt a bit naive and a little bit wrong-headed to me.
Right.
To me, it was like, you guys have to understand you're never going to win, right? Like that.
That's
this isn't
a win.
That's not even a win, right? And so, I've always defined win here as creating more libertarians, and eventually, in the long run, having those libertarians create a political market that demands that whoever runs has a libertarian message, basically. So, the way I look at a libertarian party is we need to have a radical message that converts as many libertarians as possible, such that whatever party runs on that political stage and tries to reflect culture is going to have to reflect a libertarian culture. And we're going to have to keep just staying radical to keep them honest. And that means, guess what, guys? We're never going to win an election, but we're always going to keep them honest, and we're always going to be the cultural forces. Because what I see happening, at least in Canada here, is these movements like the Green Movement, and there's socialists in the New Democratic Party. It's all these radicals that are really controlling the cultural narrative, And so when you have the liberal and conservative, prime ministerial candidates up there on the national debate stage, they have to say things that are very leftist. And that's not because they're leftists necessarily. I don't believe they are. But it's because they have to say that to get votes, because of all these radicals on the left that have shifted culture that way. And so, it always felt like a missed opportunity for me when you have the U.S. Libertarian Party, and I see thousands of people at these conventions and so much organization up there. It makes me jealous, and all focused on the wrong kind of mission, which is how are we going to get votes? And that leads you to guys like Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, who have gotten votes and who have gotten elected and can make a good case for how we're going to win in terms of getting elected. But it seems more difficult for a radical like Dave Smith or, some of the other radicals I saw on that stage break through that. So what is your take on it?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with you on your philosophy that politics is a lagging indicator of cultural change that's already happened. And until you get the culture to change, even if you got elected, I've heard you say it, you're just going to get ravaged. You're not going to be able to do anything. I've described the libertarian parties of the world as social movements disguised as political parties. And we have to do that work first. And in the type of system we have in the U.S., it's designed towards the two system. And until we change that, we've got to understand that we don't have to win an election to win. That if we even beat the spread, we already see the way either party panics, and we can start influencing their positions. The goal needs to be liberty and not party. And sometimes the party's not necessarily going to have a quote unquote win in its candidate column, but it can have wins for liberty. And I think we need to have that mindset more. We win on issues far more than we're going to win on candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I saw evidence of that here in Canada, like even the advent of the populist movement and, the growth of the People's Party of Canada. That was driven by a lot of our ideas, the ideas that we put out into the cultural milieu back in 2015 during our run, when we were putting out all these libertarian ideas and showing people that there's something different than just conservative and liberal, that there are these powerful, beautiful ideas that challenge the very nature of our system. And I see more and more people waking up to that and embracing kind of pseudo-libertarian ideas, right? And so I think, part of me is kind of, almost a little bit resentful that we're not getting the support our party wants. But at the same time, I have to look around the cultural climate and say, a lot of the ideas that we put out there are actually gaining ground. And I think that has a lot to do with the work that we've done.
And I heard you say before, too, where we have a little bit of advantage here in that we have a libertarian heritage. in a different way than Canada has. There's something I want to read to you that I think you'll agree with. You know Mark Montoni, don't you?
I don't know. No.
I think you've probably met him at convention, and just there's so many people, but he's a hardcore libertarian activist here, and he wrote something called "Why Hold Back If You're Not Going to Win," and it's short. I'd like to read it to you because I think I would love to know your thoughts on it, but I think you'll agree, and I think people out in the audience probably need to hear this as well. And he writes, at an LP gathering in May 2015, I was asked by a candidate for suggestions on presentation. He was wondering if he should tone down his campaign messages so that it wouldn't appear scary to the average voter. Before I could answer, another person sitting at the meeting said, pandering? He said what I'm thinking, and it was a good rejoinder. In the early 1990s, then State Chairman John Buckley was asked the same question, and his answer was immediate and without any hesitation. Well, you're not going to win. 28 years later, I still remember that response, and I asked the current questioner, are you going to win? He understood immediately what I was telling him. That certainly gives me a lot more freedom, doesn't it? He says. Indeed it does. Being honest about our goals, even our end goals, is liberating. Being honest with ourselves about our prospects is also liberating. If we know we do not yet have the money or manpower to be competitive, then the object of running campaigns is to get the money and manpower gathered to the party, so we will eventually have them in sufficient quantity to win. So how do we get that money? By inspiring people to join, donate, and run. Milquetoasty messages and candidates who refuse to say anything new or bold do not inspire anyone to join, much less vote for us. I favor a message that will get the attention of 1/4 of the, and he's speaking American population, that is already basically libertarian, and provide them with the nudge they need to take a leap. Only a bold message will excite those kinds of people so much that they're ready to sign on the line and send in their dues. Libertarian itself is an abolitionist philosophy. Libertarians should always speak of tax abolition rather than tax reduction. We should always advocate the full repeal of drug prohibition rather than reducing sentencing. We should call for the abolition of entire agencies of government rather than just reductions. Don't reform government police agencies or call for citizen review boards, speak for abolishing them outright. As LP candidates move up ticket, they should be more radical, not less. And he goes on and speaks about it, but I think, he says, if you're only interested in tinkering around the edges reform that are tepid and fearful, why are you even in the Libertarian Party? There are already two major parties much better suited to dancing around, and they actually win. And I think that is right on the money. Right on the money. And I think if the LP had... We've always had two minds, and it's probably of all libertarian parties, no matter the country. You always have that internal battle between the radicals and, I call them the moderates. Some people call them the prags. I don't. I think being radical is pragmatic because it works.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's
Preach,
moderates.
sister.
It's moderates.
Yeah, I mean,
If
look,
we-
you talk about what's the only thing that gets you incrementalist improvement? That's a radical message. Why are things making incrementally more and more leftist? Like, we haven't gone full commie, but we're slowly, turning up the Bunsen burner. It's that radical message, and so you're absolutely right, and this, it reminds me of what I said to when I submitted my letter of kind of resignation to the party, saying that my time here is done. I put out a list of things that I'll be looking for in the new party leader, because I'm always going to support the Libertarian Party. I'm not going to another party. I mean, I think that the Libertarian Party has the right ideas and they have the right approach. And so this is what I said is my criteria for a new party leader. I said, number one, a person who hates the state. And I put a link to, of course, Rothbard's essay. Number two.
And that's not just anarchists. There are minarchists that hate the state.
There are minarchists who hate the state, yes. But your primary goal as a libertarian ought to be, how do we get government out of the way? How do we chain it down? How do we, there are some people that look at government and say, okay, we need a little bit of evil in order to prevent a greater evil. Okay, but at least you're recognizing that the state is evil. Okay, you're recognizing it for what it is. And so a lot of minarchists will say, that look, the state needs to be chained down, and however much freedom we can get, we ought to get. And so that's my number one criteria: a person who hates the state. Number two is a libertarian grounded deeply in principle who understands libertarian theory. You know, we have so many libertarians now, and this is part of, you know, the attraction and our success and the rise of populism and stuff, who are kind of pseudo-libertarian, right? Like the philosophy and the message jives with them, it resonates with them, and so they get excited and they get on board, but they've never read anything about libertarian philosophy. They don't understand Rothbard, and so they're able to move around. They don't have a firm roots in the philosophy, let's say. And so, you know, and I see this with a lot of, you know, in Canada, these populist parties that are popping up. You know, obviously it's very easy to be against the lockdowns and all these pandemic restrictions. That's great, but do you understand why they're wrong? Do you understand the reason why the same reason these lockdowns are wrong is the same reason why the income tax is wrong, the same reason why the draft is wrong, the same reason why all these other government programs are wrong? Like, it's great that, you know, I feel as a libertarian, I'm seeing all these people pissed off at the state right now, and I'm loving it. And I'm like, man, now you know how we've been feeling for the last 50 years, right? But why are those things wrong? And so whoever's leading the party needs to be rooted in that, so that they're not moved away and swayed by whatever the latest thing is in the media that's dividing us and lining up with the side that's kind of expedient for support. Number three is a person who understands that the most important goal our party can have is to create more libertarians, because that, not winning elections, is the only thing that can lead to a free society. And so I want to make sure that our leader is focused on a true win, right? Not a real win. And in Canada, you know, hockey is our pastime. And so I often use this analogy. I say, look, all the other political parties out there trying to win elections, they're playing soccer over there. Okay, we are playing the real game. We're playing hockey. And we're the only ones that can actually win, because we're the only ones that are actually playing the real game. Like, they might be winning their side game over there, but that's not the real game. This is the real game right now. And by the way, guys, we're getting clobbered because the leftists understand that this is the real game. The people that want more power and authority, they understand that this is the real game, and they have way more numbers than us, and we're getting clobbered out here. We could use some help. And I want a party leader who understands that we're playing the real game, and the real game is creating more libertarians and shifting culture. You know, fourthly, you know, and these are all just kind of ancillary things, but I want a person who focuses on building relationships and is willing to set aside petty differences. And I cite in brackets the Dallas Accord and a Wikipedia article to the Dallas Accord, because I thought that was a great move. And I thought that was...
Link to the LPedia article. The Wikipedia article sucks.
Does it? Okay.
Let me tell you a story about Wikipedia. Okay. Wikipedia would not let me edit the Dallas Accord article because I'm a primary source.
What?
All right, just let that sink in. I was the expert on it because I did the original research, so that's why I stopped editing at Wikipedia. The LPedia article is better sourced, better information. The Wikipedia article sucks.
Great. Well, so that's on your website?
It's on lpedia.org.
LPedia.
If you're not familiar with LPedia, it's the wiki of the Libertarian Party.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
So all the historical work I've been doing all goes up onto LPedia, all the documents and things we've been unearthing. So yeah, the Dallas Accord article is great on LPedia.
But
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
On your statement of principles thing, because I was on your website earlier today trying to find the statement of principles, and I see a statement of policy. I see references to the statement of principles, but I couldn't find the statement of principles.
Really? Okay, let me just...
Yeah, I saw statement of policy.
Bylaws, Constitution, platform. Interesting. Huh, okay.
Because I wanted to compare it.
Right, yeah, they changed the website around lately, and I don't see it there.
So it wasn't just me,
yeah.
I was like...
No, it should. Usually, it's right there in the about column. So I don't know if that was an oversight or what.
Is it similar to the U.S. Statement of Principles?
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, it's 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 very, very radical. You know, it's.
But you guys don't. You can amend it easier, correct? Because ours is basically unamendable.
It's difficult. I think you need a 7/8
Of all
majority
registered delegates.
of all registered members or
Of all registered delegates.
Yes, yeah, of all registered delegates to amend it. So it can be amended, yeah.
But but you've been to our conventions. We don't have 7/8 of registered delegates on the floor at any one time ever.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
So it's possible in theory land, but in practical land, if I've never seen that many delegates on the floor. But again, I suppose you could rope everyone in, but it's virtually impossible to amend.
Yeah.
What's the threshold on yours?
It's 7/8. Yeah, 7/8 of
Awesome.
delegates at a convention have to amend it. So it's difficult to change. And you know, this was part of the reason why I thought the merge with the PPC, which with this kind of star charismatic leader, might be a brilliant move on my part, because in order for my members to agree to the merge, they would have to see a statement of principles, and I was going to try to sell Max on our statement of principles and have our policy in place, which meant that it would then become the de facto Libertarian Party without being able to change that policy very easily. But anyways, yeah. But so those were kind of my recommendations for leader, and the reason why, you know, the Dallas Accord kind of spoke to me was this idea of unity, right? Of we need to set up, you know, because we have this habit as libertarians to focus on petty differences and to fixate on them, not just focus on them, but fixate on them and debate those rather than say, okay, guys, like how can we work together to get out the message of liberty? Like we all agree in the non-aggression principle and how property rights come to be, you know, and what the ramifications are of that and how we need to restrain the state. How are we going to get that message out? But rather than focus on all these petty differences about, you know, whether someone says anti-racism or this or that, and you know, so that was kind of my message to our members about what I want to see in a party leader. And I think that the candidates we have for party leader here do represent that. And, you know, I think that in a large part they have to represent that because we have these other parties. We have so many other political parties in Canada that are kind of pseudo-libertarian in that they say they want to restrain government, but in most areas, but then there's always one area or two, like the People's Party thinks there needs to be regulation on drugs and has kind of a foreign policy where they don't want to be involved in so many wars, but we got to fight them over there before they come over here, and you know, different things like that. And they have an immigration policy that has a values test and a quota and stuff like that. And so, you know, we need to separate ourselves from these other things. And you know, so even if you're a pragmatist, even if you should want to have a radical message to our Canadian people.
What I'm finding here, unfortunately, and I can't imagine it's much different anywhere else, is in dealing with the unity thing, the people who favor a more radical message can subsume within, like, kind of my attitude towards the moderates is you do you, boo-boo. You're not hurting me. Go out and do your moderate thing. You're going to reach people I can't reach. But the moderates cannot tolerate the radicals.
Yeah.
Now, there's some radicals who won't tolerate the moderates, but it's not inherent in the radical view to not tolerate them. It's just certain personalities are just dicks. But it seems to me lately, almost inherent in the moderate view is that the radicals got to go. And that's what I'm starting to see is the problem. And there is a wide... Like, there's two speeches that were given within a week apart. One of them was my speech at PorcFest, which was one thing. And then at the Michigan convention, Justin Amash's speech. And not saying that Justin Amash is a perjurer, because he's not. He's the nicest guy you'll ever meet in your life. But if you put the two speeches side by side, I don't think you could have had... I don't think there's one point where we weren't opposite on Like literally point
Right.
for point was whoop. So that's what we're facing, I think, here. And I have no problem, though, with the people who are much more moderate. Because, again, they're going to reach some people. But I really am starting to feel that the moderates don't feel the same about the radicals.
No, I think that's true. I've seen the same thing in Canada. You know, in fact, one of my right-hand men was kind of a moderate guy. He was like, you know, the radical sensibilities just rubbed him the wrong way. And, you know, for example, when I brought Lauren Southern back, and she has a very kind of, you know, black and white, like kind of a radical message, he didn't like that much. And, you know, he resigned as soon as he could. I see that fairly regularly. So it's difficult because, you know, your temptation is always then to be like, well, how can I get the most support as a party, like from libertarians? And it's almost like having a moderate message will get me more support, but my DNA won't allow me to go more moderate. And I don't think it works that well.
I don't think it works either. I honestly don't, but there's a comment that I know how I would answer it, but I'm very curious how you would answer it. So JG says, I love radical message, but, you know, everything before the but is worthless. Just continuing. But
let's say and JG.
But it is often easier to dismiss by average voters as nonsense without even giving it much thought than, let's say, the Milton Friedman approach.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to that. I think you can do both. I think you can have a radical message that isn't immediately off-putting. You know, like you want to. My approach has been keep the radicalness in the message, but try to understand how the audience is perceiving you and what your audience is, and speak in their language. Right? Understand that, you know, they don't understand anarchist jargon. That when they hear your message, it might be off-putting, and so to try to put it in as gentle terms as possible without watering down your principle or your message. You know, and, you know, I'll give you an example. In Canada, you know, healthcare is, you know, if you take a poli-sci class, you don't touch healthcare. You don't say anything about healthcare because Canadians love their universal healthcare for some unknown reason. You know, and they're always like, well, do you want American style healthcare? You know, but I remember at one convention or one public debate I said, look, my goal here is to legalize healthcare. Okay. Notice I said legalize healthcare, end the prohibitions on healthcare rather than privatize healthcare. Privatize healthcare. Now I would be saying the same thing if I said privatize healthcare or legalize and end the prohibition on healthcare. Those mean the same thing to the educated listener, but they sound very different to an audience that you're talking to. And so that to say end the prohibitions on healthcare, I'm like, the audience is like, what? There's prohibitions on healthcare? Well, yeah, guess what? I'm a paramedic. I can't provide you with services unless I'm working for the government. And when I'm working for the government, my job is to produce paperwork for them, not to provide you care. Providing you care, dealing with your pain, making you more comfortable, dealing with your every need gets in the way of me doing my job, which is to produce this lengthy document full of data for the government to figure out how to allocate resources and justify their bureaucracy. And so, you know, it opens up conversations when you understand the audience and you can empathize with them and understand how they're viewing you. So yes, choose your words carefully, communicate it in a way that they can understand, in a way, you know, but don't water down your message at all. So I want to end the prohibition on healthcare. Sounds better than privatize healthcare. So that there are ways of approaching messaging where you don't have to be like an in-your-face, you know, troll or something like that, where you're speaking very harshly to people and saying, you libtards and your blah blah blah. And these are messages that are going to be off-putting to people, and so our goal ought to be to how can we connect with them and connect with their heart. And of course, and so it's important to take to become better at communicating, and whether that's taking classes or workshops or just really getting out there and speaking in front of people over and over again and learning what works and what doesn't. It's incumbent on us, if we're serious about getting our message out there, to learn the best way to communicate to people. And I've learned that people will listen to what you have to say and listen to your ideas much more if they believe that you care about them and you are one of them and they can identify with you. And so spending some time talking about your background and talking about how it must feel to be your audience, and how this world is, all the, when I'm talking about healthcare, like the long lineups and the limited resources and the burnout and everything else, man, it sucks. And then we lead into, here's what I would do about it. And this is going to sound harsh at first, but I'm telling there are ways of communicating it. So yes, you can have a radical message, and it can be compassionate and meet the audience where they're at.
Empathetic radical.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there was a presentation I did at the Kansas party. I used the example of, but who will build the roads, and tried to communicate to them when people ask that question, because it's always so weird. Why is that the first thing everyone thinks of, like when you're first dealing with a status for the first time? And I'm like, they're not really asking you about the roads. No one really cares about the roads. If you want to break it down, what they're really asking is who's going to take care of the poor grandmas if nobody else, if the government doesn't. That's what they're worried about. They're not worried about the roads. Nobody really cares about the roads that much. You got to get behind the question. What are they really concerned about? And you need to show that you care about that too. And people will listen to you a lot more if they think, A, you're not going to be making fun of them, for one thing, and that you understand that there are difficulties and real problems, and that there's real injustices. And I said to the same audience, the reason why I don't think we make more inroads with women and with minorities is because, only speaking as a woman, some libertarian men kind of give the impression like they think they're going to be, using Jordan Peterson's terminology, the top lobster in Campistan. Women know they're vulnerable. They know they're not going to be the top lobster. And you have to recognize that and not present this vision of the future that's just red in tooth and claw and like Mad Max, Welcome to Thunderdome. That's how I start that speech. I go, welcome to Libertarian Thunderdome, bitches. Because that's sometimes what we present. And that is not going to be attractive to women or minorities. Because they know what it's like to be under the foot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And so you have to understand, okay, if I could hit a button tomorrow and end the state, yes, of course I would. But what does that sound like to the average listener who
I don't know pictures? If I would. Is that heretical? I'm going to do a show on that.
Fair enough. And honestly, I don't know if I would either, because I think that, I've said this before, that you hit a button and you end the state. What happens is you get a bunch of other states warring, basically criminal gangs, popping up and taking their place. If you did that,
people would die. And do we not bear some responsibility? We didn't all spring out of the room a fully formed libertarian. In the past, I voted for some of these policies. So do I not bear some responsibility to try to ease people off them? If you just eliminated the state tomorrow, a lot of people would die. I mean, let's just be real. So that's always been my hesitation, that don't we, for whatever we might have contributed to this system, bear some kind of responsibility to ease people off of it. I don't know, maybe that's my soft side coming out.
Look, I think, I want to be a badass like Rothbard, and going back to his essay about hating the state. But honestly, I probably do agree with you. We want to. I like Kokesh's approach, which was an orderly dissolution of the government, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I agree with you. Ultimately, look, in order for the state to disappear, what has to happen? We have to have a society full of libertarians committed to the non-aggression principle, committed to voluntary relationships. Now, if we had that, the state would disappear. right?
Right.
And so if I could hit a
Rothbard
button
even
and that
says,
meant that everyone would be, yeah.
the button
If I hit a
doesn't
button and that
exist,
meant
you
I'm
know?
changing culture, and because of the change in culture, I'm
Right.
eliminating the state. That's very different than having the status culture we currently have and just blowing up the government and disbanding it. While that hasn't solved anything, statism still exists. New governments called criminal gangs that are going to claim legitimate authority are going to pop up, and it's going to be a war. You know, it is going to be nature. But my point is, that's exactly what your audience hears when you talk about abolishing the state, right? And so, keeping that in mind, how are we going to introduce to them to these voluntarist ideas, the idea of the non-aggression principle, of nonviolence, and that sort of thing? You know, we don't have to bring them to Ann Capistan in the first speech. We can introduce them to these radical ideas, and that don't sound so radical when you talk about just voluntary consensual relationships. You know, you can introduce them to those ideas and you know, ease them into the philosophy. You don't have to like hit them right in the face with nature, red tooth and claw, and we're going to get rid of the government, blow up Parliament, and you know, hang all the traitors and different things like that. So, yeah.
I have actually two last questions for you.
Sure.
I've become more and more convinced that you know, we went from monarchy to democracy. Democracy, I do think, is an improvement upon monarchy, but I'm not a fan of democracy, and I know that just makes some people want to die when I say that. But I think the next political evolution actually is something along the lines of panarchy. Also, and this ties to my second question, is in reading Jonathan Haidt's work, I'm starting to suspect that there might be some truth to the idea of political determinism. And if there is some truth to that, there's some people who's just never going to be libertarian, and we shouldn't want to make them be libertarian. And that's where I think panarchy comes in.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, in a sense, we kind of have a panarchy right now. We don't have a one world government. We have a bunch of different states, right?
But they're not consensual. You can't say, well, I want to belong to the commies.
Sure.
Like when the commies take over, they don't care what you want, you know? But I have no problem with people being commies if everyone wants to be.
Sure, for sure. Well, I mean, that would be an anarchy to me. But yeah,
well,
you're right.
Panarchy,
there might be different ways to organize yourself, right? Well, look, in Canada here, we have this sect of Mennonites called Hutterites, and they're basically communists.
I'm familiar with them. Yes.
Sure, and you know they share all their resources. Like no one can make money. You know, it all goes to the whole commune, so to speak. You know, as a teenage boy, I used to. We had these Mennonite neighbors who had these giant factory chicken farms, right, with 20,000 chickens. And you know, when they went to harvest the chickens, we'd go there at 10 o'clock at night and work for 4 hours catching chickens. So we'd haul these chickens out, 12 to 18 at a time, to the trucks. And quite often these Hutterite men would come over from the neighboring colony and make some cash money because they paid pretty good. You know, for 4 hours work, you could get $120 or something like that, which is pretty good money. And they would use that as beer money because they could make it off the books from the colony and not have to give it back to the colony, right? But, you know, the colonies, they're voluntary from what I can see, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's what we want. But, you know, I wouldn't be happy in that sort of environment. I would want one where I can separate myself and my work would be rewarded, right? And I wouldn't have to suck at, you know, old John there who doesn't work as hard as me and isn't productive as me, isn't getting the same benefits I'm getting. That's just me. But other people might like that. So yeah, I think you're right. You can have a panarchy. In terms of Jonathan Haidt's work, now this is something I'm struggling with. You know, I'm actually trying to write an article about this right now. And for people following, if you want to subscribe to my newsletter and my, you go to my website, timmoen.net. And, you know, I put all my writings, podcasts, tweets, everything is kind of there. But one of the things I'm struggling with is just that very question about political determinism. And it does seem like our personality does determine our politics. And, you know, like I said, I did Jordan Peterson's Understand Myself personality test recently. And, you know, I got my wife to do it as well. And yeah, we're very different personalities. You know, I am I fall right in line with what Jonathan Haidt predicted a libertarian would fall in line with. Very high in trade openness, lower on empathy, lower on conscientiousness, low, and that, that describes kind of a libertarian personality. And of course, I would be more attracted to libertarian philosophy than someone else. Now, that doesn't mean we're not right. I mean, also libertarians, by the way, on that very high in intellect. And I scored like 96 out of 100 on intellect, which doesn't mean that you're high IQ. It just means that you're very interested in philosophy, abstract ideas, learning, and all those kinds of things. But you're very interested in principles.
on autism too.
Right. Yes, absolutely. But my wife scored very low on where I scored high, my wife scored low, right? Which is why I think we make a great team, and we kind of feel our strengths where others are weak, kind of thing. Hey, but my wife lives in the present. She lives right here and right now, like what's going on in this house right now. Like she doesn't give a second thought to politics and what's going on in the abstract and all these ideas that undergird civilization and different things like that. But I'm consumed by it. And the personality test, I think, kind of explains that a lot and explains why a lot of us are. But, what I think I'm going to try to do with this article is grapple with the idea of, okay, well, knowing that we have the right ideas, how do we then convince people to have consensual relationships, in the political sense and in that sort of thing? How do we convince people of libertarianism? And, I don't know what I'm going to say in this article. So I'm grappling with this whole idea myself. Part of me thinks that... It's been
preoccupying me so badly,
right.
The whole concept, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that, the way I'm going to look at it is, okay, understanding how other people think determines how I'm going to speak to them, how I'm going to deliver the message to them. Because I do think that libertarian offers something to liberals, to the liberal brain and the conservative brain, that they can both appreciate if they understand the philosophy. But if I'm speaking to a liberal versus a conservative, and when I say liberal and conservative, according to Jonathan Haidt, what I'm saying is when I'm talking to that type of personality versus that type of personality, this is what I'm doing. And the politics is just like an extension of that, where, and to libertarian, all they're adding in on top of their personality is the use of force, really, and the violation of property rights.
But they don't see it as force. That's also part of it. Your average person does not see themselves as an aggressor. So when we all run around talking about, the non-aggression principle, they think they're not aggressive.
Yeah, but what I've been questioning lately is this idea. I see a lot of it in libertarian circles right now, in that the left is basically lost. Like, don't bother speaking to them. It's the right. It's the right-wing populists that we got to reach out to and that sort of thing, because there's a lot of overlap with libertarianism and right-wing populism. And I'm wondering if that's actually true. And I'm wondering if maybe the midwits, as Tom Woods calls them, actually are onto something in the fact that they are kind of, they're appealing to left-wing sensibilities, let's say, with talk of anti-racism and different things like that, right? I get where some of the detractors of that are coming from, and I'm very sympathetic to them, and I probably agree with them. But my mind is starting to be changed a little bit when I look at Haidt's personality work, because now I'm wondering, if we're looking at the left's personality, the way Jonathan Haidt describes it, they're very high in trade openness, like second highest libertarians, and the right is low in trade openness, which means open to new ideas, open to changing their mind, open to new experiences. Okay, and so if I'm going to change someone's mind, wouldn't it be someone who's high in trade openness? And we saw this actually with the Ron Paul campaign. What Robin Kerner calls the blue Republicans. These were Democrats primarily that got sucked into the Republican Party because they liked what Ron Paul was saying about anti-war, and they were basically fiscally conservative, which means fiscally libertarian, and that they didn't want the government spending a lot of money and that sort of thing. But they always went with the Democrats because they felt the Democrats were addressing this government control and of social things and of all these this warmongering. And so And if I look at my past kind of political leanings before I discovered libertarian philosophy, it was probably more. The left definitely resonated more with me than the right, and that was again because of my personality, high in trade openness.
Right.
Okay, so I'm open to new experiences, and when I looked at conservatives saying no porn, no swear words, no
Right.
this, no that, I'm like, well, geez, I what are you trying to do? And so I think, so part of me is wondering whether, well, there's no one right way to do things, but I think what I might grapple with in this article and think through is whether it's correct that we should just dismiss the left altogether and say, well, these guys, because we libertarians kind of are behaving, and they're behaving very badly. They're very intolerant. They're very negative. I don't understand it. I remember a convention I went to with Nick Sarwark back in 2015, and he seemed much different at that thing than what I see online and what he's doing and the shade he's throwing at people like Tom.
He's had a personality change. Like, he's not the
Yeah.
same person. There's Nick Sarwark past and Nick Sarwark today, and the two twain shall not meet. It's
Right.
wacky different.
Yeah, and I think the charitable way to interpret this is that the environment that you are put into as a leader is makes you pick a side, essentially, right? And you kind of pick a side that's friendlier to you than
That
not.
could
And
be.
I'm guessing the left was maybe more friendly to him than the right was.
Well, you want to
so
know
to
what
speak.
else I tend to think is, I used to think it was a big plus. Nick was one of the few second-generation libertarians I ever knew. Avance O'Brien is another. But you know what? When you are the same thing you were when you were 5, there's a good chance it's not really who you are. Like, it's who your parents made you to be. And maybe Nick's just finding himself now that he's a parent of so many kids. He's got 4 kids
Could be.
now. And I tend to think maybe he was raised libertarian. And I'm not saying he's not libertarian. I'm just saying, though, he might be finding himself more than what his parents wanted him to be. That's the way I'm kind of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm seeing other people I'm friends with on Facebook throwing shade at Tom Woods, and saying he's a neo-Confederate
Tom's the
and this
nicest
and
person in the
I
entire
know,
world.
and I just cannot grok this at all. And I'm like, what is going on here? These people portray themselves as being sympathetic, empathetic, and all these things, and they're just throwing all the they're taking people in the worst possible interpretation and spinning things, and I don't understand
Tom
it.
is like, oh my God. Like, listen, I can be rough around the edges. Dave Smith can be rough around the edges. Tom Smith is the biggest teddy bear. Like, oh my God, he's the most loving, adorable sweetheart. It breaks my heart to see people saying these terrible, terrible things about him. He's just a good person.
Yeah. And this kind of thing breaks my heart. It's kind of like I don't know. I'm thinking back to that commercial with the native guy who's shedding a tear because of all the
with the garbage.
I feel like that guy. I'm looking like that, looking at the libertarian movement, going, "You're making me shed a tear here." You guys on the left who are constantly throwing shade and undercutting these other people. Why? They're on your team. They're like peace, love, voluntarism.
Yeah.
I mean, why you got to be like that? So I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. And so I can totally understand why there are people who are kind of anarcho-capitalist, Rothbardian, more right-wing libertarians like I am, who see the left as irredeemable when they see things like that. And I'm hoping to take some time off here and grapple with the question of that. I want to think they're not irredeemable. I want to think that we can work together and that they're just coming from a different focus.
I consider myself, obviously libertarian, but within the libertarian family, I'm center left. I'm much more, I think I'm more sympathetic, and I have some distinctly left ideas, like I don't believe corporations are libertarian whatsoever. That's definitely a distinctly left idea. So it just drives me really, really crazy to see people that I think I would probably, I say it comes with the pink hair a little bit too. I think with the pink hair, like a little SJW seeps into your brain. It just comes with the bottle. Because I have sympathies that way, but boy, they've just gotten out of control with the way they're attacking people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a question for you for James Chapman asks.
Tim, what are our chances for Jumping Border to get to the
He
Tom
has a-
Woods 2000? What does that mean?
In October, Tom Woods is having a 2000th episode extravaganza in Orlando, I think, or is it Tampa? It's somewhere in Florida.
Oh my!
So I
Well,
think it's the
that would be
16th.
fantastic. That would be fantastic to go to. I'd love to. You know, I've never met Tom in person. I'd love to meet him
Oh
in
my
person.
God, he's such
I've
a
been on the show.
sweetheart.
Yeah, I can
met
tell
him
that just by looking
Pork
at him.
Fest.
So.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
Pork Fest was the first time, and I just could not believe how nice he was.
Well, I hope, you know, some of these pandemic restrictions loosen off. My wife and I were going to go to Vegas in August.
Well, Florida
Finally
is
get
the
out.
Wild West, so you don't have to worry about
Right.
Florida, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe
Well,
we'll see
the
you in
thing-
October.
Maybe, you know, the thing I worry about is the U.S. government is right now restricting non-essential travel into the U.S. For Canadians. Now, I think it's a little different with air, but there's so many rules and different things, and I got to get a COVID test and this and that, and it just seems like so much hassle right now that
Yeah.
you know, I want to avoid it. But yeah.
Well, I hope you do come, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there, though it's not, you know, no like announcements or anything, because the future's kind of up in the air a bit, but that'd be fantastic if you could be down there, and you'd be free of all your responsibilities at that point. So
Yes. Yeah, I could say whatever I want and
Yeah,
you know,
well-
represent however I
well,
want.
I was gonna say
But-
I say whatever I want now, but you see what happened to me.
Right. Well, and to be honest, I do too, but you know. Yeah, well, no, listen.
I don't think like I do. I mean,
No, look, you I've seen you from my time touring the Libertarian Party conventions in the States, and you've always been a fixture, and you've always been fantastic, and I've always appreciated you, you know, and it's a real pleasure to be on your show. So thanks so much for all you do
yeah,
for Liberty.
thank you.
And you know, look, you know, I don't know what to say about all this heat you're taking, but know that you got people that support you and love you, and I'm one of them. So
super
you know,
super
keep your
appreciate
chin
it.
up.
Look what a friend got me, a pink whistle, and it says
Oh,
don't
nice.
make me use this.
Oh yeah, nice, love it.
Well, thank you so much. I don't want to keep you much longer, so I super appreciate it, and keep fighting for liberty up there.
You bet. Thanks so much, Karen.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna let you go and do my closing. Thank you so much,
You
Tim.
bet.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, let me go back to my other screen here. Here we go. Yay! Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Sorry for the sound problems in the beginning, but we did figure it out. If you're kind of skipped ahead, I don't know, probably 5 minutes in, I'll stick a little thingy somewhere that says when the sound cleared up, and I'm so glad it cleared up. That was fantastic. I remember hearing Tim when I first became an anarchist, and I was just like hungry to see other anarchists, and to hear him speak and realize there was anarchists in Canada was just, or as I like to say, Canada, was just so fantastic. So thank you all. I've got another show potentially to record, but I'm getting old, so I'm tired. But I probably should record it because I promised Clayton. So you guys have a good night, and I'm going to do my closing. Bye-bye.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.